So I had a couple of questions that came up from people when I had shared this video related to making choices in life. And one of the important questions that came up was, what happens when somebody is wanting to deal with an abnormal kind of a situation, or let's say, if somebody wants to make a choice or a want which is not normative, which is not as usual, then what do you do in those kind of situations? Well, all choices simply mean that you are willing to take a decision and you're willing to pay a price for that. So when you do normal kind of choice making, you'll end up paying normal prices. But when you choose abnormal, very different kind of decisions and make choices, then the possibility is that you may have to pay a little higher, more intense kind of a price. And that's what's important to understand. So what typically happens when you want to make a choice which is out of the ordinary is that in the first place, the frame of the context or the frame of living is looking at life and issues in one particular pattern and way, and now you are presenting a perspective and a point of view which is probably completely different. So there's going to be a bit of a struggle between the roles and the people who are in that frame of reference and you, because your thinking is different and their thinking is highly programmed to the normative kind of situation. And the second important thing is, in terms of your focus of pursuit, you are doing something which is either out of time or out of quality or out of patterns. And what the rest of the world is comfortable with is to be in the pattern, to be in line. So whenever we make choices which are not in line, then the price that you pay, be it intellectual price, be it the emotional price, or sometimes a price related to relationships, price related to the pain that you're going to go through, would certainly be of a higher quality. What would this mean? Suppose we take an example that if the whole pattern of the family growing up is that they all the children go through a normal kind of educational pattern. They go through school, then they go to college, and they go into typical kind of academic programs like engineering or commerce. And then if suddenly one of these youngsters comes up and says, I don't want to go beyond the school. I'm completely focused on doing something about nature, and I don't want to study in the college. Now what happens is the whole family could be very aligned to normative ways of children growing up, getting into the school, getting into the college, and to them this can come through as a shock. And therefore, when that particular youngster wants to make a decision, the opinion opposition, the emotional opposition, emotional resistances of acceptance could be much more severe. Now, of course, we can always say that, look, if you want to be happy in life, you got to pursue what you want to pursue. That's for sure. But at the same time, in terms of clarifying to so many people, convincing so many people, especially if you are choosing to be in the same kind of living environment, becomes that much more difficult. Certainly, the world is changing today. People are a lot more understanding when exceptions are also accommodated within the typically, traditionally normative kind of terms. But to that extent, the emotional, intellectual price that you pay is higher. The amount of pain that you go through is a little more severe. A lot of times this resistance and opposition comes from very good intentions. They almost tend to say that, look, it's after all for your good. What they do not understand probably is that what you consider to be good for me is not good enough for me. I would also say that this choice of exceptional decision making must also be very, very deeply reflected, introspected, and it shouldn't be one of those superficial, flashy kind of decisions. The other kind of situations where such a decision out of the way comes up is when you want to pursue a career which is very different from the normal patterns. You want to have relationships which are not as per the usual societal patterns. You want to live in an environment which is not as per the normal social patterns. You want to pursue probably professions which look very, very different, sometimes challenging, sometimes even a little bit threatening compared to the usual patterns. If you're wondering what kind of a role it could be, for example, a youngster wants to become a stunt actor, okay? A stunt actor means there is a certain amount of risk that one is willing to take, and that can be seen as very different. Hey, forget all that. On some very simple things, like falling in love with somebody, and that person could be out of your caste, out of your religion, out of your society normative standards, and you could have a lot of resistance. Why? You could be wanting to marry much ahead of some of your elderly siblings, and that could cause resistance. You're wondering whether it's possible? I'm sitting in front of you. I'm a live example. I got married before two of my elder brothers, and that was not easy. That was not easy at all. So the point is, when you make a choice which is very different from normative patterns, what you should be willing to look at are the following. Number one, you should probably take double the or the triple the amount of time and introspect and reflect and think through very deeply about your choice. Second, you should introspect and very deeply think about who are the important roles with whom you have got to interact, negotiate, create conviction to accept and support your decision if you want that support. Third, either if you do not have that support, or even if the support is there but it's not adequate enough, the price or the pain that you should be willing to accommodate in your life will be different, more significant compared to the others. And one should be willing for that. And as long as that price can be paid, that pain can be sustained, that sacrifice can be undertaken, or that more difficult path can be chosen to walk through life, you can still make your choices. So make your choices. All the very best. Thank you.